Hi everyone, I'm going to look at the game from the Armageddon game yesterday in the match between Maxime Vachier Lagrave and Nepomniatchi. And this was in round 2 of the Magnus Carlsen Invitational online event taking place at the moment. Really fascinating tournament with 8 of the world's top players, including Magnus. And playing white in this playoff game, the scores were 2 points all, hence the Armageddon game. We've got Maxime Vachier Lagrave, and black is Nepomniatchi, so they're ranked 5th and 4th respectively in the world, and Ian has got the black pieces. So we had e4, and we had e5, and we had knight f3, and knight f6, the Petrov defense, which has a drawish reputation, but this suits Ian because he only needs a draw to be declared the winner. I think that's the rules of the match. But if they're not going to keep playing more Armageddons or anything, it's just a simple one game. If black draws, then he goes through to he's declared the winner of the match rather. So we had knight e5, d6, knight f3, knight takes e4. A slightly unusual move, d3, knight f6, now d4, d5. So this is more like a French defense exchange variation now. Bishop to d6 and queen e2 check. We had bishop to e6 blocking the check, and now knight g5. So white manages to gain the bishop pair. Queen e7, knight takes e6, fe6 and c3. So we had this in a game in the castles. This was played, this line in the candidates between Grishuk white and Wang Hao black. When Grishuk got a slightly better ending out of it for white, but it wasn't sufficient, and the game ended as a draw. This time we had f4, which is a different idea to what was played in that game. So the idea is to use these 2 pawns to clamp down and block the e5 break, and then hope that this pawn on the e6 can be attacked later in the game. But at the same time, white's neglecting development in order to do this. So c5, which logically puts pressure against the center here. And we had castles for white, knight c6 developing, bishop e3 protecting the d4 pawn, and rook a to e8, and knight d2 developing. So if white has time to play knight here, then it's going to get a position that he can then work with because there's a grip on the center. But Jan played the sort of somewhat astonishing move e5, allowing, it looks as if you're dropping a piece after fe5, which wasn't played in the game, but then black simply can sort of temporarily sacrifice a knight. This is the idea that after knight e5, de5, queen e5, we've now got a double attack on the bishop, and also here, so it's not really that much of a sacrifice because it's quite a simple line. There's no way for white to protect both this and h2. I mean, say you can try and play bishop f4 to move the bishop and stop the check, but then queen e2 happens, bishop e2, and first bishop takes f4 perhaps, and then after rook f4 we can play rook e2, and black's just emerged a very healthy pawn up. So if you play instead of that rook f3 to protect the bishop, we can play queen h2 check, and now king here is no use because of knight g4, followed by rook f3 and rook takes e3. So you'd have to try king f1, but this loses the queen after queen h1 because we can't now go here because of knight g4 is mate. The bishop's covering the g3 square. And if you play bishop g1, of course, then the queen can be taken, and black is winning the position. So instead of that, we could play after fe5, after e5, fe5, knight e5, de5, queen e5. White can actually play the move bishop takes h7 with check, and this sort of bails white out, because if you play king takes, You run into queen d3 check, king g8, and now bishop f4 is possible this time because there's no bishop on pre on e2, and white survives and is doing okay. And if instead knight h7, this allows white to play rook takes f1 with check, and after knight f8 we can then play knight f1 because we're still in the pin and this is threatened, but knight f1 protects both the bishop and the threatened pawn, and white's doing sort of doing okay then, because if d4 trying to exploit the pin, there's queen c4 check. That's now opened up this diagonal, so white escapes the pin. So we had d5 in the game, and after knight e5, fe5 is probably white's best move. Now transposing back to that line, where after queen e5, white should jettison the bishop. But what actually happened was bishop b5. Doubtless that Maxime was expecting simply a knight retreat. Clearly black can't move the rook now because we can play takes, and now knight f3 because no longer is queen e3 possible since the rook has had to move. So white would be winning on material. So perhaps he was expecting knight here or knight here, but it must have sort of been quite a shock. I just assumed that Maxime completely overlooked knight g4. It's hard to understand what exactly he missed here. But, the point was that after bishop e8, rook e8, white's unable to stop this move, gaining 2 pieces for the rook. A knight and bishop for a rook, which is in the middle game is a winning, near winning, or certainly advantageous transaction for the side with the knight and bishop. So we had rook f3, and now knight e3, rook e1, and the knight dropped back to f5, and almost in disgust really, Maxime resigned the game because eventually black's just going to roll through with the d pawn. I mean, it's a very early resignation, but he obviously was very unhappy about sort of overlooking this move. It's a rather astonishing, quick end to the game, and that meant that Jan collected the, I think it's 2 points v1 if you win on Armageddon, rather than 3-0 where you go straight through. So that was an interesting sort of almost like an opening trap, which I think Jan knew. And so I hope you found that interesting, and thanks for watching. If you did, please subscribe and like the channel. Thank you very much. Bye now.